Hello, everyone, and welcome to our joint iJET International and Gold Spring Consulting webinar, Risk Management, the Achilles Heel of Meetings and Events. Our subject matter experts, Teresa Thomas and Kevin Iamoto, will share the results of an industry-wide meeting planner survey and resulting e-report. They will touch on key topics of concern and pull the meetings and events industry together as a global community to think strategically about integrated risk management in its developing and high-need travel segment. While duty of care and risk management have been a staple for corporate travel programs for many years, application of similar best practices specific to meetings, events, and group travel have lagged behind the corporate travel sector. We'll discuss how to get started, industry best practices for location and site assessment, venue and hotel selection process, and emergency planning and preparation for meetings and events professionals. And with that, I'm going to introduce today's co-presenters. Teresa Thomas is Senior Vice President at iJET International. Teresa is responsible for building partnerships to enable top-tier travel, financial services, and technology organizations to deliver insight through iJET's people, location-centric intelligence and services. During her 20-year career, Teresa has worked with industry-leading companies while holding key leadership positions. Kevin Iamoto is a senior consultant at Gold Spring Consulting. Kevin brings more than 35 years of experience in corporate travel and meetings and events management to clients. His work on select projects and consulting engagements specialize in global procurement, category management, strategic sourcing, meetings and events, and strategic meetings management programs, and SMM Maturity Index for programming. Now I will turn it over to Kevin, who will be leading the presentation.
Thank you, Erica. We are very thrilled to be part of this joint webinar with our friends at iJET. And our portion and responsibility was really to collaborate with iJET and come up with an industry-wide survey that will kind of give us some data points that we would like to share with you today. And then Teresa will follow up with some best practices and high-level coverage of best practices and things that you can take proactively to kind of improve your duty of care, risk management, and safety and security for all of your meetings and events. So without further ado, let me jump into some of the high-level findings of our survey. So our survey found that the meetings and events industry has lagged behind the corporate travel sector when it comes to acknowledgement of and taking responsibility for duty of care and risk management. And a lot of this has to do with the decentralization of meetings and events in corporate organizations, as well as a lack of clear understanding as who's really responsible for duty of care, safety and security, and risk management when it comes to owning meetings and events execution, processes, protocols, and policies. So the first thing that we noticed that caused a little bit of consternation on our collaborative is the fact that when it comes to duty of care and risk management, our survey results showed that while 64% seems like a solid number, it is still very troublesome given today's environment where anything can happen anywhere. And if you're not adequately prepared, it could result in loss of life. So 64% is a solid number, but it's not a great number. More companies closer to 100% should have duty of care, risk management, and safety and security built into their meeting and event planning. What was even more troublesome is that of the respondents, only less than 30% had any kind of standalone risk management programs in place to support meetings and events. While the 55% number shows, again, a fairly decent number, though it should be closer to 100%, less than 30% have acknowledged meetings and events and have done anything around duty of care, risk management when it comes to meeting and event planning. And of the respondents who currently have a program in place, what was even more troublesome is less than 50% actually review or test that program or their protocols on an annual basis or semi-annual basis with any kind of regularity. When you think about it, a plan is only as good and effective when you know that it works. And the only way to know and validate that it works is if you test that program and you test that plan. So with less than 50% actually testing their protocols, their processes, and plan in place, it could definitely lead to some serious consequences if that plan is not workable, or it's got gaps that need to be addressed. And what's even more troublesome is 32% really haven't even tested that plan, which leads us to the critical gaps. So when it comes to gaps, planners can be more strategic and play a more valuable role within their own organizations if they raise their hands and take responsibility for being more proactive when it comes to risk management planning, protocols, and policy management. And keeping in mind that they can take a leadership role in mitigating the risk and impact to all of the employees, their clients and partners and contractors, and ensuring that their companies are meeting duty of care needs for all of the attendees as well as staff that may be present on site. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Teresa, who will take you through some best practices around meetings and events and duty of care and risk management.
Thank you, Kevin, and thanks everybody again for joining the webinar today. The focus for the second half of the presentation is going to be on how to get started. Kevin and I and many other people in the meetings and events industry for the last 12 to 18 months, and Kevin I know far longer, has been focused on trying to create more thought leadership and awareness of this critical and important issue. What oftentimes planners tell us, however, when we're out in the market talking to them, is they really don't have the tools in place today or the best practices or standards to know how to get started. So the goal for the rest of the presentation will be to provide you a high-level set of information that will be guidelines for that. However, please feel free to follow up after the presentation to get additional information, whether that be from iJET or by working with former colleagues in your office and as part of the transient program, as well as other risk providers. The first step is making sure that you are assessing your program. There are three key things that you need to keep in mind. Preparation is critically important, both for your RFP process as well as in preparing your attendees before they go. Making sure people are taken care of when they're on site, and you're constantly monitoring anything that might be evolving or changing since the time you left. And then certainly making sure that you have the appropriate response policies and programs and relationships in place should you need to engage them. The testing and review of those programs is also very important. As Kevin just pointed out, when you look at the statistics of the survey results, that is a huge gap. It's not good enough just to kind of check the box and say, okay, I got a program in place. You also own maintaining that program. When you're going through your meetings and events throughout the year, you're going to be learning things. There's key takeaways from the impacts that are happening. Make sure you're using those as opportunities to continue to evolve your program, because it's not just going to affect you, it's affecting every individual attendee, corporation, brand, and sometimes financially, the outcomes of these meetings and events globally. Once you've assessed your program, you want to make sure that you're constantly maintaining your program. And this could be specifically related to a singular meeting and event that's taking place, or a year-long program of meetings and events. So some of these things that you see on the slide here are probably part of your normal process. However, I encourage each of you and challenge you to ask questions beyond the traditional. So when we think of things like location and site assessments, which many of you do probably on a daily basis, please challenge the venues, the hotels, around safety and security. Think beyond conference rooms, food and beverage, on-site amenities, and really question what they are doing to make sure that if there are impacts on-site, that they have the right people in place. They and you need to designate security points of contact, both for the meeting and while people are attending, as well as somebody back home, because oftentimes that point of contact who is on site may also be impacted by the particular event that might be taking place. They may not be able to provide or execute against the program, the crisis communication plans, or the emergency preparedness planning that's been done in advance. You need to have a backup and make sure that you and the hotel and the venue have the right points of contact that are coordinating information and making sure you're making the best decisions for your attendees. And again, it goes without saying that you need to make sure that these plans are constantly reviewed. There are different types of plans, communication plans, emergency and preparedness plans, and we're going to go into a few of those in some of the additional slides. Specifically, we're going to talk about the communications plan, as this is something that comes up on a regular basis. And I can't stress enough that, and you probably know this both in your professional as well as your personal lives, when communications break down, everything kind of breaks down. Even the best plans, if there's not good communications around them, aren't going to be as effective, or sometimes not effective at all. The first thing to keep in mind is that there are a huge number of stakeholders here. I stress very regularly that you as a planner or a meeting planning company do not have to own 100% of the responsibility around these things, but you do need to make sure that you have the right subject matter experts backing you up so that you know who to call and engage when these types of events happen. It's important to know things that maybe you don't think about on a regular basis. And I'll just point out here specifically, make sure you have indoor and outdoor assembly areas where people can go to get quick answers to information. So they're not running around on property, they're not moving around when they shouldn't be in an unsafe environment, but they have a place to go centrally. It's very important when check-ins and things like that need to happen, that people can show up in one location, check in, that information can be captured and shared. If people don't know where to go, then you're not going to have the ability to centralize this information. The other thing that I'll point out, I'll specifically call this out because of the recent events that happened in Las Vegas last year. It's really important, whether at a venue or at a hotel, that you talk to your attendees about entry and exit routes, evacuation routes, egress and ingress areas, because the one thing that was I would say that one of the biggest learnings from the Las Vegas event is people didn't know how to get out safely or efficiently, and there were not a lot of areas for people to shelter in place. So thinking through those types of things when you're looking at having off-site events, or even when people are on site, a lot of hotels and venues will have certain lockdowns, certain doors won't open or close depending on what the impact or the crisis is. So you need to be thinking through those things, having those conversations. Again, think beyond the basics. If you are holding events in high-risk destinations, which I do know that oftentimes have to happen, all of our companies and our clients sometimes have to operate in very high-risk locations around the world, and therefore it requires that they have meetings in those locations. If that is the case, make sure you're doing additional due diligence. Don't assume because people operate in those environments on a day-to-day basis that the people that you're sending there also will be protected by those same customs, norms, or knowledge of the area. Look at past event history. Make sure you understand if there's any specific anniversaries of large-scale events that have taken place historically, because those oftentimes repeat themselves, or there might be geopolitical or protests or things tied to them that you could help avoid your attendees finding themselves in the middle of. Think about setback distances and access to controlled screenings and all of those things that, again, I think when we're in what are perceived to be non-high risk locations, we don't do as much due diligence of. So make sure you're layering this additional level of oversight to any meetings or events that are taking place in a high risk destination. If you are not sure what a high-risk destination is, or you don't know what the proper setback distance is, or how to get your hands on past event history that can be validated, work with your risk management partners. They are experts in this. This is their job to do this every day. They can help you by providing the information you can use to make good decisions and communicate with your attendees. In conclusion, some points here that we've touched on throughout the presentation, but I wanted to raise again, is that similar to the transient travel space a number of years ago, corporate executives are recognized that companies have a liability that exists around protecting attendees while they're traveling for meetings and events. It seems intuitive, but believe it or not, and as you saw from the results that Kevin shared at the beginning of the presentation, oftentimes meetings and events is overlooked. People don't apply the same standards around duty of care. Now executives understand that this liability exists, and in a force multiplier way, because you're not talking about an individual transient traveler, you're talking about a whole group of people. Meetings and events leaders, therefore, are now being asked to kind of step up and wear one more hat as they're planning their and supporting their meetings and events. So the responsibility is greater, the accountability is greater. But again, I think planners are in the perfect position. Just leverage the stakeholders that you have, leverage things that are in place, and leverage the relationships with the risk management providers who can help you and facilitate a lot of this for you. And then it goes without saying, I think Kevin and I both stressed a number of times that preparedness is so critical. Making sure that you've thought through every aspect of things, that you have the right communication plans in place, can save crucial time, and in many cases, not to sound overly dramatic, but as you've seen in many of the recent events, it is a life or death situation. You do not want to find yourself in a position where you have not taken the time to think through things when those critical events arise. So I encourage you again to, in 2018, make this a priority for your programs. And then if you need help and you want to have a partner in thinking through that, iJET is here. I know Kevin has tremendous experience in meetings and events and has been a huge thought leader around the role that risk management plays tied to those meetings and events. We would love to hear from you, understand your questions, and be more than willing to support in any way that we can. Thank you again for your time and participation. And Erica, I will turn it back to you.
Thanks to both you, Teresa, as well as Kevin, for your time. That concludes this on-demand webinar with iJET International and Gold Spring Consulting. Please email us at pbiwebinar@ijet.com for information about how you can access the complete e-report. Thanks for your time and have a great day.